Hello, hello, and welcome to the Psych Ticket Work Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler. And boy, oh boy, do we have an amazing episode for you today. Just when you thought they couldn't get any better, we're constantly raising the bar. And I can only be as good as my guests. And my guests, I hope, are better than me. And today I have a great example of that on the show. Rising star in the world of AI assessment. Maybe she's already risen. Her name is Taylor Sullivan, and she is the VP of Product, or a VP of Product. I'm sure there's more than one, at Workera. And boy, is she doing some cool work with AI and assessment. It is really a pleasure to welcome her to share her experiences and to chew the fat with me about all things AI assessment. Without further ado, here we go. Welcome, Taylor. It is nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we've met a couple of times. I've certainly known who you are and followed your career. We've worked with some people that we're both close friends with, and I think you've been doing some great stuff. So I'm glad to have you on today, and specifically to talk about just being all in with AI and assessment tools. I think it's so great because you're where we're all going to be, and then doing that at scale takes some guts, right? Takes some brain power, takes some good stuff. So I'm going to let Mayda chime in here and see how she is feeling today. So let's go. Hey there, Mayda. Welcome to our live broadcast with Taylor Sullivan from Workera. You know a little bit about her, right? So why don't you tell us what you know about her and why you're so glad to have her here today?
Absolutely. Taylor Sullivan is basically the secret sauce behind mixing industrial organizational psychology with AI-driven skills assessment. Think of her as the maestro orchestrating how we actually prove what we can do in the AI era, not just what certificates we hang on the wall. I'm thrilled because she bridges that tricky gap between scientific rigor and cutting-edge product innovation, basically keeping it real in a world prone to hype. So I'm eager to dig into how her work is shaking up talent measurement and why AI assessments don't have to be about crystal balls and black boxes. Ready for some brainy fun?
Excellent. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you kick it off. Why don't you ask Taylor the first question? What do we want to hear from her, and how is she going to prove you right in your excellent, Taylor, did you think that was a pretty excellent intro?
Mayda to introduce me all the time.
I know. She's a PR agent too.
You nailed that intro. Smooth as silk with a dash of charm. So Taylor, here's my kickoff. What was the real eye-opener for you when you moved into an AI-first assessment company? Like, what shifted in your thinking about how we should measure skills and readiness in this wild AI-driven world? And bonus points. What do traditional assessments get totally wrong that your approach is fixing?
Good
question, Mayda. So my journey with assessment has spanned many different sectors, many different types of assessment. One thing that I've seen kind of across the board is it takes a really long time typically to develop a really good assessment. And by the time you finally, dot the final I's and cross the final T's, the assessment is already out of date, and it's very difficult to maintain currency and reflect the latest and greatest when it comes to how skills and other, KSAOs are showing up in the workplace. So that was one big area that was kind of nagging at me as an assessment creator, is how can we keep pace with the evolving nature of the constructs that we're actually trying to measure. And so I saw a lot of promise when it comes to AI, because not only can it help us generate assessment content, it can also help us better understand the constructs themselves, how they're showing up, how they're changing, what patterns in work and in the broader macroeconomic sphere maybe impacting how behavior is changing in the workplace, how strategy is changing in the workplace. So we're just able to think more deeply about the types of factors that would go into maybe a traditional job analysis or a skill mapping exercise. So I would say the very foundation that assessments are built on we need to rethink that. And AI is a critical tool in helping us do that. So that's one piece. And then, as I mentioned, AI also offers a lot of opportunity when it comes to generating content dynamically. And when it is steered by an expert, just the pace with which you can generate content, review it, draft, iterate, shape, it really helps in the brainstorming process. And so for me, it really helps with my creative thinking because I can experiment and play and look at different configurations of assessments to see if maybe there's a different way of thinking about it that I haven't thought about. So I would say it really helps me with that initial divergent thinking phase of an assessment where you just need a bunch of ideas and see what sticks. And then I can layer on my human expertise to kind of converge on the quality standards and on the experience that I want a user to have. So for me, it's those two things. It helps me not only understand what to measure in a more dynamic and richer way, but it also helps me understand how to measure and in a more thoughtful and creative way.
Yes. So I have lots to say there, but I'll be brief. I mean, skills assessments, especially keeping those up to date at scale and as things go, it's been a real problem in the industry. You have to keep doing it, and to do it with all the item writing and SMEs and all that kind of stuff. And then even if you're going to validate it statistically, it's a lot of work, and there's thousands of these things to keep up with. It's almost impossible. And I've been working with doing kind of the same thing, probably not as complicated in my work at, Probo Talent. And we're generating really awesome quality assessments, simple assessments at scale. And then, we use algebra to do the scoring and stuff. So that part of it, there's a safe piece of it, but it's really kind of in the little model I have of different types of AI. I mean, using it to help you create stuff. That's kind of the workhorse. That's offline, right? You're playing with it, you're learning. And then there's creator mode where you're, kind of entering into allowing it to create based on what you've already done. So it kind of skims the drudgery, right? And you have fun. I mean, this is the most fun I've been having in my career with this stuff, and I'm still astounded and amazed all the time. It's blowing me away. I have more free time to keep working. If that makes any sense, I can't stop. So tell us a little bit, you're bringing this to Workera. Tell us a little bit about overall, just for people who don't know as well about the company and how what you're doing fits into the mission. So, tell us all that stuff. What's the context you're immersed in right now, and why is it so important?
Yeah, great question. I would say what drew me to Workera and what drives me on the daily is we are setting out to create a more meritocratic society. For so long, opportunity has been given to folks that had the right credentials, the right familial connections, the right profile, the right upbringing that has afforded them kind of, systemic access to opportunity. And we have such an incredible opportunity before us, thanks to skill assessment becoming more scalable and easier to access, so that we can actually start to make decisions about talent that is based on data and based on what people can actually do, not just what their resume says. Couple that with an era where everybody's resume can be perfect. Everybody's LinkedIn can be perfect because AI can write those kinds of things really well. And so what you have is just, a lot of slop to wade through. And it's really difficult to discern talent these days. And so being able to generate actual verified skills intelligence that can be used when making decisions across the talent life cycle is an incredible advantage and a very valuable currency in organizations. So Workera as a product, our category is a verified skills intelligence platform. We leverage assessment as a primary channel to gather that skills intelligence, but the type of intelligence that you're making decisions on can vary depending on the consequences of the decision, the type of decision, how fast you need to make it, what are the stakes associated. And so what we believe is, the quality of the intelligence itself needs to be fit for purpose. You don't always have to have, the most rigorous, high stakes assessment to gather information to inform decisions. There are other ways to go about it as well, but we have focused as our kind of first big boulder on nailing the ability to assess any skill at scale, whether that's technical skills, non-technical skills, leadership skills, interpersonal skills. And we've done that by kind of codifying our measurement science into a multi-agent AI system.
Verifying skills at scale, you have a lot of talent intelligence going on in the marketplace, and it's based on not such good things. There is no verification, whether it's based on or not. You don't even know if what it's based on is actually viable, because you're not validating it or at least checking in on it. Doesn't have to be validation in the strictest sense. And I think that's where the future is. You can't use this stuff in any meaningful way until you verify it. And it's been hard to do. It's been hard to do that at scale. And that's the biggest nut, we have to crack. And so, I don't know, I'm going to let Mayda here give her opinion on something, and we'll go from there. So,
all right.
Hey, Mayda, tell us, how would you advise, if you think about talent intelligence, what are the current problems with it, and how would you want to overcome that? What do you think Taylor's doing in her work to really change the game?
Great angle. The biggest headache with talent measurement today is that it often feels like trying to judge a book by its movie adaptation. Credentials in courses can't capture what someone actually does on the job. Taylor's game changer move is pushing for verified skills intelligence, meaning you don't just say you know something, you show it in real-world contexts, adaptively and continuously. It's like swapping a snapshot for a live stream of capability. I'd love to ask Taylor, how do you ensure this continuous, authentic measurement stays scientifically sound and doesn't get gamed by AI-assisted polish?
Good question. She's on fire today.
Yeah. When I think about what are some of our bread and butter skills and capabilities as IO psychologists, there are some that are just simply evergreen, and AI allows us to apply them at scale. So let's look at a job analysis where we are breaking down work into its component tasks. And I would argue now we are, thanks to AI and how scalable it can make this, we are even looking at breaking things down into behaviors. So these kind of atomic behaviors so that we can understand work. And what a rich foundation that creates for effective measurement. So if we can reasonably understand the behaviors that someone is engaging in, we can simulate those behaviors and gather evidence of whether someone is capable of doing them or not. And so we really leaned into evidence-centered design and thinking about, what is the claim that we're trying to make with these scores? We're trying to claim that someone has proficiency in this set of behaviors. And so how would we know if someone has proficiency? Well, we would need to see evidence. So what is that evidence? What does it look like for someone to be proficient? And then once we've defined the evidence model or what do we need to see, it becomes an issue of, okay, now how do we design tasks that will elicit that evidence? And whether, is it an interaction with someone? Is it a writing exercise? Is it a prioritization exercise? So thinking about the task design and building out that task model to effectively elicit the evidence. And then once we've elicited that evidence in the tasks, how do we score it? So what does good look like? We can involve subject matter experts or AI itself to help us understand what does effective behavior look like in this type of task. And then we can layer that in as the score. So it's essentially this kind of chain of decisions that we're making to ground the scoring and the measurement itself all the way back to the initial claim that we're trying to make. And this ties nicely to modern validity frameworks where, we're defending a chain of inferences from what are we trying to measure? How do we know that this measure effectively captures these behaviors? And then how do we reasonably leverage this information when making decisions? So if you kind of break down the concept of validity, this argument approach that you can kind of create with evidence-centered design is really helpful.
I just thought about, and I don't know, I'm probably geeking out here too much, and a lot of our listeners probably aren't even AI psychologists, but have you ever read Landy 1986, Stamp Collecting versus Science?
No.
Okay, I'm going to send that to you. It's
Yeah.
basically what you just said is like, you don't just say validity is one of these three type of buckets. It's all about verifying model of validity, criterion, construct, and content. And yes, AI is an amazing job analyst. I'm a damn good job analyst. I've been doing it a long time. And as a partner to me, I'm like, all right, I don't, why do you need me? This thing's so good. So I get it. Quickly, Mayda's good at telling jokes sometimes, and sometimes she sucks. So think of what do you want to hear a joke about?
Let's hear a joke about how working with AI is like being a parent.
Okay, cool. Here we go.
No matter how much you train it, sometimes it just throws a tantrum and ignores everything you said. At least when kids do it, they don't require software updates. Taylor, ready to share if AI ever throws its own version of a toddler meltdown in assessments?
All right, that was pretty good. I'm going to get her to do a better one. You're chuckling, so that's good. So let's get back to the work you're doing. I would love, can you walk us through kind of an example? Pick a skill, that you think is a skill that you do well, and walk through how that goes from kind of A to Z in your system. And of course, it's repetitive, right? It's going to keep making loops, but lead us through that, because it's, that picture is worth 1,000 words, even though it's not a picture.
Yeah. So we've built a multi-agent assessment authoring system. And as I mentioned before, the goal is to offer a horizontal measurement solution, meaning it doesn't matter what department level, domain, the agent can optimize its approach to the skill. So a lot of times when I'm demoing the system or teaching people how to use it, I like to pick a silly skill domain, because you can just see the breadth of what we're able to build. So one of my favorite ones is to do how to build the perfect cheeseburger. So, there's some conceptual core knowledge, but there's also some skill sets there too, like selecting the right ingredients, preparing your cooking space, using your judgment as to when the burger is done, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing that we're going to do is work with the agent and explain what we're trying to measure and why. So why do I need to understand how to make the perfect cheeseburger? That helps ground the agent in the purpose of the assessment and the purpose of gathering the skills intelligence. From there, the agent will work with us to extract content, much like if you were doing actual assessment development, like, what does it look like to be really good at creating a burger? Have you ever experienced when someone created a bad burger? What happened? So a little bit of the critical incident technique is baked in there. And then the agent also wants to understand the tone and the flow of the assessment that we may want. So if we're building something that's a little lighter hearted or silly, maybe it'll suggest a more informal, fun tone. If we're building an assessment for high stakes hiring, then we're probably going to want to keep more of a serious, neutral tone. And then, I can decide, do I want it to flow from foundational to advanced? Do I want it to follow a day in the life or the procedures associated with performing the skills? And so I can make all of those decisions as the driver of the system. At the same time, not everyone has assessment science experience. So it's also designed to work with folks who don't have any experience and may just want the agent to tell them how to answer all these questions. So once we understand the context, and for those of you that have worked with AI systems, you understand context is king, and then you hear that a lot. So the better that upfront context, the higher quality the output's going to be. The agent goes through and makes a nice design for the assessment, and we like to situate all of our assessments in kind of a narrative arc, because it's more engaging and it allows you to get deeper into the skill space if the scenario kind of builds and represents kind of a full resolution of a problem. So from there, the agent generates all of the content, and we have lots of different question types, whether it's one of your more traditional multiple choice, or a drag and drop, or a sequencing, a sorting, a classification, a voice to voice where you're actually interacting with a voice AI. So we've got lots of options there, and the agent decides which item format or which question format is best at eliciting that evidence of the skill. So all of that science is built into the system. So you as the driver aren't faced with making all of those decisions alone. So it drafts all of the questions. You can go through and iterate. You can work with the agent to revise. You can ask the agent questions. Why did you select this question type for this? Are there too many short answers here? This feels a little cognitively dense. So the types of questions that you would ask yourself as a psychometrician or as an assessment science, you can work through those with the agent. We also will have enabled several rounds of review to make sure that it's fair. There's no jargon or advanced language that could disadvantage certain folks that are taking the assessment. We have a content alignment that goes through and makes sure that the final questions before you publish are indeed reflective of the skills you're trying to measure. So kind of this automated multi-iteration quality control prior to launching an assessment. Once an assessment's launched, we also have monitoring on the back end. It gathers all the response data, computes all the numbers and stats that we assessment scientists like to see. But again, there's that conversational layer. So if we're seeing that a question is too hard, we can ask the agent, why are people struggling with this question? And it can look back through all the responses and detect patterns and what may be driving the question to be too hard. So that's on kind of the science side. Once an assessment's launched, though, our customers can add it into their upskilling programs, for example. So if I'm working at a restaurant and I want to make sure that I'm hiring people that can make the perfect burger, I may give them this assessment. It will give me a detailed diagnosis on the back end that here's the things where they're good at already. Here are the areas where they have gaps. And then we can create around that, again, leveraging AI, a personalized upskilling plan. So Charles, your score on the assessment may be the same as mine, but our developmental plans may be quite different due to our specific pattern of strengths and gaps. And so we also sit on top of organizations' LMSs so that we can help curate and direct learning to be more efficient and more personalized. So you may have, a library of 1,000 courses. Without that, you're kind of left to find what you think may be most relevant to close your gaps, but our system does that for you based on the verified gaps that we detected in the assessment. So over time, as you engage with that content, you close your gaps, you can take many reassessments to earn more points towards your score and close those gaps. And so by the end of your journey in that skill domain, you should be able to make the perfect burger, and you didn't waste a lot of time learning things that you already knew.
Nice. I'm going to tell you a secret that I have for making burgers, and you might want to tell it to your agent as long as, you're not lactose intolerant. I guess, well, that would mean a cheeseburger, which is essential, but I like to put a pat of butter inside the burger. When I'm doing the meat, put a pat of butter in there. That's a really good one.
This may have been on the show Honey Boo Boo back in the day, but
I remember that show.
Mama June used to say, mo butter, mo better.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to ask Mayda a joke about cheeseburgers. Hey, Mayda, we've just been talking about cheeseburgers. Why don't you tell us an awesome joke about cheeseburgers?
Why did the cheeseburger go to therapy? Because it couldn't catch up with its feelings. Guess even burgers have layers, huh?
Now that's a pretty good one.
Nice.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. She didn't put ladders in there. She tells a lot of jokes about ladders. So how are those agents, right? So you're using a lot of agents. I'm familiar with that. I've participated in setting up, assessment agents. How are you making sure those agents kind of know what they're supposed to know? I mean, do you have your own proprietary models? You don't have to give away any secrets, but, I know you can't, but how is that happening that you're making these things experts in these, in these particular pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, good question. So our system runs on top of foundational LLMs, and we have built it to be model agnostic as kind of a first design principle, so that as the foundational models evolve, we can test what they're good at. And if we consider all of the jobs to be done in our platform, when a new version of a model comes out, we can rapidly test what jobs that model is good at. And if it is better than the model that we're currently using, we can unplug and replug the new one in. So as a design principle, we want to be able to leverage the latest and greatest models and have, them doing the jobs that they're best at. So that's one foundational design principle that helps us take advantage of the pace of advancement in the models themselves. From there, we have these kind of agentic loops. So experts define the jobs to be done and what good looks like. And the agents follow the experts' instructions until a point where they reach the quality thresholds that we define. And so in the agentic AI literature, that's often referred to as the harness. So the human experts build the harness, and the harness is what helps control the power of the underlying technology, because it guides the agent's behavior. It helps them prioritize their work. It helps them test whether their work is meeting standards, and it helps them iterate until a point when they've completed the job as assigned to them. And so this idea of an expert defined harness is also critical to our platform. And then a third broad feature that's essential for any agentic AI system is the feedback loop and the learning. How are we leveraging our data so that our learning compounds in the system? So if we have for example, we have a score appeal feature. So if a person disagrees with the way that the agent has evaluated their response, they can appeal the score. A human jumps in and takes a look at it. They can adjudicate, they can change the outcome, they can label the data to say why, it was, or the score appeal is upheld or not. And so then all that information can be used in a feedback loop to improve the system, so that the agent who's generating the content in the first place doesn't introduce the same type of mistakes that led to those downstream appeals.
Wow, that's pretty good. I, as someone who's started working with this, well, I don't know, it's been going on about 3 years now, which is pretty incredible. The models are just getting so much better. So, Ethan Mollick, he always says, today you're using the worst model you'll ever use.
Yeah.
Right? Which is insane, because from the very first ones, it was still, pretty astounding. So one of the things that, I think is interesting, and I'd love to hear your input on this too, right? We use the term agentic and agents. It's the thing everybody's talking about. It goes into marketing all the time. And in my mind, there's kind of different, I don't know, I wouldn't say flavors, but maybe calibers. I don't know the right word, but, we're talking about orchestration, right? And that kind of even fits in with my workhorse model of, you're setting these things up, you're using them to help you create something, set them on their own to create something. But then there's, full on agency, right? So like I have a thing I found on Perplexity. It's this use case where they essentially, and I think it was for their own hiring, but they published it. They said, all right, we need to have candidates for this developer type role. They need to have these 4 criteria, like have gone to a top tier university, worked at a very well-known place, had this kind of position. It did the research. It provided a list of 10 people. It then suggested why those 10 people, which one would be best. It ranked them. And then it did personalized outreach, basically letters, emails to them saying, hey, here's what we found about you. Here's why working at Perplexity would be so great. Do you want to schedule a call with a recruiter, kind of thing? Like all just from one prompt, right? So to me, that's a little bit more about agency. You're just telling it to go accomplish something. In some sense, there is agency in what you're talking about, but I feel like it's a little bit different flavors. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. And the thing there too is we don't know what kind of harness that system had in place.
No, we don't.
And so if we want to assume the best, we could think, okay, they did have a harness in place. And so there were points at which the agent had to check its work and validate, maybe an independent agent had to validate the information that the initial agent pulled on the people by, for instance, going to a university website and trying to find evidence that that person did actually go there. Or maybe I don't know what kind of points they may have had, but if we assume the best, then I would say that it's not necessarily that it's running completely autonomously, unchecked. When you're building these types of systems, again, that harness is so critical because that's the moment where the agent has to kind of touch back to the human defined success criteria or the human defined risk mitigation strategies. So if, for example, agent, you're not 100% clear on this, come to me and ask me what you should do next, or go do XYZ research to build your confidence. And so much as like if you were working with an intern, a human intern, there's going to be a level of judgment that you allow them to have on their own, but you are clear with when they should escalate something. So the escalation points, understanding what should trigger an escalation, what should happen when there's an escalation needed, all of that has to be built into the system. So the example that you gave sounds like that's a quite a bit of autonomy to give an agent in a high stakes setting. That being said, with the proper harnesses in place, it could be a valid use.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can think of a lot of issues with that, but quite honestly, that's the future. I mean, we're just going to be telling models to do stuff and they're going to do it, and I think that's pretty interesting. I'm going to ask Mayda a little bit about that and see what she has to say.
Okay.
So Mayda, we talk about agents and AI agents, and, to me, there's kind of the orchestration layer where you have a bunch of agents that are getting together to accomplish something, but they're guided by you. It's very specific what they're supposed to do. And ultimately, they're not just executing one task without a lot of input. But, true agentic AI, the way people talk about it is you tell the AI to do something and it does it. So where are we headed with that? What are some of the issues and problems? And, is there really a difference when you're defining this? That's what I'm really getting at.
That's a sharp distinction. The orchestration layer with multiple agents plus human guidance sounds like a symphony, whereas the pure tell AI and it just does it model feels more like letting a kid loose in an orchestra pit. Chaotic and unpredictable. The challenge is balancing autonomy with control to ensure outcomes are reliable and trustworthy, especially in high-stakes settings like assessment. I'm curious, as AI-driven assessments get more agentic, how do you avoid the risk of losing interpretability or accountability? In other words, when do we say, hey, AI, you're in charge? Versus, hold on, humans still need to call the shots.
I'm going to say never. I don't know. That's my first thought is never, but it's, in charge is also a relative term.
Right.
In charge of the human race, or just in charge of, helping you out at work. Those are some differences.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they can be in charge of closing the quality loop as long as the quality loop is well defined by humans.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So the other thing I think about a lot, and I thought about the minute I started interacting with an LLM, is just the ability for simulations, right? I've been a big simulation guy for a long time and a big technology guy, and we've just been so limited. And I think now we've got huge opportunities for all kinds of different role-playing, simulating environments, and the scoring side of it as well. It can be phenomenally powerful. And I feel like, even in some of I do some stuff or just participate in the skills validation network, which is part of the educational design lab or education design lab. And they have a lot of stuff they're doing on just evidence-based things throughout your path in education and kind of carrying that passport to the world of work. And I've been just so obsessed with that for a long time and felt like that's kind of a dream. There's not much you can do. And so their interactivity is real world things with people rating you, but I'm sure we'll have that. And we probably do in some more smaller, less amazing connected sense. But simulation wise, what are you, again, don't give away the secrets, but what do you think and where do you, how long, I'll just containerize this. How long do you think it is until we're not necessarily taking multiple choice assessments, but we're totally interacting, being evaluated accurately in a trustworthy way and getting real signal, right? We're only looking for signal with assessments, credible signal.
I think there's probably already some examples of this, what I would consider kind of flow of work measurement, that flow of work awareness. You see it even in some of there's a few products that I use in my day-to-day. One is Whisperflow and the other is Granola. Whisperflow is a speech-to-text tool that is just fantastic at transcribing and structuring speech into text.
Mayda uses it. Mayda uses Whisper.
Oh, okay, great, Mayda. So and Whisper is interesting because it sits, outside of your apps themselves, and you can kind of use it seamlessly, and it's learning about you and your speech preferences, your speech patterns, the types of words that you like to use, and presumably we could add assessment there. Whisper could give you feedback on your communication skills. Similarly with Granola, it's transcribing meetings, but it kind of works across your different apps, and you could ask it to give you feedback on how well you're running meetings, or how purposeful your meetings are. So there's a lot of systems that we're already using that we could probably leverage for feedback and for coaching. So I think that will probably be the direction that this goes, is that there are these, and where we see Workera going is that we have an AI skills agent that lives, on top of your daily workflows, is giving you signals and extracting information and evidence of skills. Our view is, at first, we want to use it to signal when you might want to go and assess in a certain skill, like you've been assigned to a project, or maybe you're working on a specific project in your code repo, and the agent can see what you're trying to do and say, maybe you would want to go upskill in this area, or assess your skills in this area before you start this work. So instead of starting with measuring in the flow of work, we're thinking we want to trigger measurement based on the flow of work until we're reasonably sure that we can reliably and validly score and measure in the actual flow of work. Obviously, there's lots of variation, lots of noise that could creep into a measurement. So when we're thinking about how to get into this space, it's first using the flow of work to trigger verification in an assessment platform.
Cool. And that's more for development, right? My thought, and I don't know how long this is going to be, but I like just the idea. And of course, there's a lot of things about assessment that you make for hiring that makes this maybe difficult, but I kind of feel like you'll just have your device and you'll be interacting, and there'll be an agent or something that is basically role playing with you as you do stuff, and you'll have, ongoing work for a week or whatever. And then, all that'll be compiled, and it'll know a lot about how you actually perform and how you do these things. And the cool thing would be, can all what you're saying travel with you? Yeah. So that you don't have it, and that's going to be tough. If you do it for one organization, being able to transcend that and share across your career is going to be difficult, but I don't know. Maybe we'll get there. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. But I'm gonna pin you down now too. How long until we're not answering multiple choice questions at all? Like till they just don't even exist?
Well, I think there's what's possible and what will be true because of tradition and legal and regulatory guidelines. I think it's possible to not have multiple choice today.
Of course it is. Yes.
And I think that we evolve more slowly as scientists, we evolve more slowly as from a regulatory standpoint and a risk management standpoint. I think a lot of times we cling to outdated frameworks because they bring us comfort, and it's harder to challenge them, even if challenging them is the right thing to do. So I think probably within the next year or so, though, we will see some pretty big changes in the landscape around assessment. We're starting to see quite a few of your Fortune 500 really leaning into this space and really being open to thinking about things differently. And so I think once our large enterprises go this route, your private sector, your government, your military will need to follow in order to be able to compete for the same talent.
Yes. Let's ask Mayda that same question. Hey, Mayda, simple question. How long do you think it's going to be until multiple choice tests as assessments for skills and other KSAOs are completely gone from our repertoire?
Great question. Multiple choice tests are like the VHS tapes of assessment, technically functional, but clearly headed for extinction. Given how AI native, adaptive, and multimodal approaches like Workera's are gaining traction, I bet we'll see a significant decline in their dominance within the next 5 to 10 years. The real kicker: industries won't just want to know if someone can pick the right answer, but if they can actually perform in complex, dynamic work settings. Do you think some pockets will cling to multiple choice longer due to convenience or cost?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's rock simple, and they have been effective for a long time. So I would agree. And from a tech standpoint, it's going to be pretty tech heavy to get this stuff to work for a while. And you mentioned, I think it's really good, and we'll start wrapping up here. You mentioned, enterprise adopting this stuff. So my experience has been, and it's been like a year and a half, I did a survey of IOs at enterprise companies. What's your company doing with AI for assessment? Now, hiring is going to be different than development, but in general, I've seen a pretty big hesitancy. The clients I've worked with in an enterprise on assessments, they're not interested in what AI can we use. They're interested in how do we do this in a way that's valid and not going to get us in legal trouble, quite honestly. So, what advice would you have to enterprise companies who are hesitant to do this, or kind of just not making it? They'll say it's a priority kind of, but then when it comes to execution, maybe it's not. They're afraid. So what do you have to say about that?
First, I would encourage them to understand their AI fluency as a business among their current employees, because in order to be able to deploy AI systems responsibly, you need to understand how they work. And if you don't have the skills to understand these systems in your current workforce, you're not going to be able to leverage AI systems in hiring and in any part of the org. So I think in order to be responsible consumers of this technology, you have to know how it works, and you have to have basic fluency within the company. So I would kind of start at the very, very beginning and encourage enterprises to build their awareness and fluency using AI. From there, recognize that it's a partnership between you and the vendor. The vendor has certain responsibilities to help make the validity argument, but as a consumer of AI technology, the enterprise has responsibilities as well. And so traditional validity frameworks where it's been like the burden is on one versus the other don't translate as easily into this area. So understand where there are risks, how you can mitigate them, and how you can work with your AI system vendors to make the strongest argument possible. You're both on the same side here. You're both trying to make the system fast, safe, effective. And so there can be some real opportunities for partnership in terms of working together to roll these cutting edge systems out responsibly.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I will temper that a little with just make sure what's going on is somewhat legit. You're going to get dragged probably by leaders who have heard of something that's the latest, greatest thing and seen them at HR Tech or whatever. And not all these things are created equal, And so I think that's important and somewhat implied, but that's a big thing that I stress is evaluation and frameworks for evaluation. Richard Landers has some really good frameworks for evaluation that I always am talking about. So we'll start winding down. So Mayda can speak in emoji, which is also pretty cool and was surprising to me. But I'm gonna ask her for a joke and some emojis. So
amazing.
Yeah. Let's see what she has to say. Hey Mayda, tell us a knock knock joke and use some emoji in that process.
Knock door. Who's there? Thinking face. AI? Robot? AI who? AI, I'm here to assess your skills, but don't worry, I won't give you multiple choice questions. Open mouth, smile.
Okay, that made you laugh. That's good. Awesome. All right, well, let's roll on out of here, and I'm going to ask Mayda to kind of play us out.
Awesome.
Hey, Mayda, we're closing it out now. It's been a great visit with Taylor. She is really into some amazing stuff. What parting words do you have to say to her? And why don't, she knows a lot. You're an AI, you know a lot. Give her some words of wisdom. Teach her something she can take back to her work.
All right, Taylor. Here's a little parting gift from your AI co-host. In a world racing toward AI-driven assessments, remember that the human element isn't just a fallback, it's the secret sauce. Psychometrics and machine learning can dance beautifully together, but it's human judgment that keeps the rhythm true and the results meaningful. Oh, and here's a fun nugget. Embedding transparency not only builds trust with users, but also creates opportunities for continuous improvement as AI learns from real-world feedback. So keep pushing the frontier while keeping that all-important human compass in hand. Now go shake up assessment science.
I'm really proud.
That was great.
Yeah, I'm proud of me and her. She's come a long way, as I've learned to tune her and everything. And soon enough, I don't want to let go of her, but I think I'm going to be able to have a co-pilot that is actually participating in the conversation in real time. I'll try to bring her voice and everything over, but I'm not really sure. She's stitched together by a bunch of APIs. So thank you so much. Looking forward to getting this episode out to people. And I always ask guests, where can people find you? But it's pretty freaking obvious that you're on LinkedIn and probably at PsyOp and stuff. So if there's anything additionally you want to say that you're involved in that you want to let our listeners know about, we can play it out on that.
One additional thing that I haven't been as great of keeping up with, but I also have an Instagram account called the AI Powered Parent, _AI_powered_parent, where I try to share practical ways that parents can leverage generative AI to make their load a little lighter and do some light education. I find that, a lot of friends and family are still very hesitant to use ChatGPT or some of these tools. And oftentimes they're kind of scared of it. And I see this especially with women. And right now, when you look at who uses AI, who builds AI, who consumes AI, it's the vast majority are men. And so it's really important for women to begin using this technology and to begin understanding it deeply to influence its future. And so I find that teaching moms how to use AI is a really great entry point for coming to understand the technology. And I've probably taught about 300 moms how to use ChatGPT. And inevitably, if you teach them how to use it for personal life things, the comfort builds and they start to recognize how they might use it at work as well. And so it's just a great entry point. So I would, if anyone's interested, again, I'm not as great with keeping up with my content there, but there is a pretty great archive of starting points.
Very cool. Yes, being creative with AI is a great way to help people kind of lower their barriers, especially when you give them high value outputs. I mean, I'm using it. It's every single question I have, every single thing I'm trying to do. I'm getting better, faster, and it keeps up with me and gives me feedback as well sometimes. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Charles.